At our number 10 spot, we have booby traps. This war was infamous for Vietnam's use of guerrilla warfare on the US troops, but this came largely due to the fact that Americans invaded, locked, and loaded, despite what many believe the US outgunned and outmanned the communists, so they needed to find other ways to fight them. And their response was these intricate booby traps. These things were devastating, and just by the looks of it, I understand why US troops' morales were dropped completely down the drain after running into these. The jungle terrain was hard enough having to deal with hiding soldiers and underground tunnels, but imagine walking and running into some of these traps. Some include the punji sticks, which were these sharpened bamboo coated in either poison, feces, or even urine, which could cause immediate infection if stabbed. Another one is the cartridge trap. When soldiers stepped on this trap, a nail acting as a firing pin shoots bullets straight up at the victim. We also have the mace, which is a tripwire trap that triggers a 40-pound spiked ball that swings from a tree and gets stuck onto its victims. These were only a small list of the booby traps contained within these dense jungles. I feel like I should make a top 10 on this, but if you guys are interested to see, here are some other traps. Terrifying, right? At number 9 spot, we have Operation Wandering Soul. The sounds coming from the Vietnam War definitely ranks one of the highest in terms of pure horror. With the Viet Cong hiding in the dense jungles, nowhere to be seen, Americans knew that they needed to bring their morale down without the use of firearms. So in the middle of the night, they would commence Operation Wandering Soul. This is a way for Americans to demoralize the Viet Cong by playing eerie sounds and altered voices on speakers. These sounds were supposed to mimic a wandering soul because in Vietnamese culture, if a proper burial is not done, the soul of the deceased will wander the earth as a malevolent spirit. And during the Vietnam War, many soldiers didn't get a proper burial. The most famous of their recordings was named Ghost Tape Number 10, and the best way to explain it is just to play it for you guys. At number 8 spot, we have Agent Orange. With the jungle being an issue for American soldiers, they decided to use a controversial weapon known as Agent Orange. I warn you, this one is pretty cruel. Agent Orange was a herbicide mixture which contained a dangerous chemical known as dioxin. For those who don't know, dioxin is extremely toxic and can cause skin lesions, developmental problems, immune system damage, and can cause cancer. They estimate that around 3 million Vietnamese people had been affected by Agent Orange during the war, with a recorded of up to 150,000 children born with serious birth defects due to this chemical. Other than the lives this chemical took, the worst part about this was that the dioxin could remain in the soils for decades. This has caused Agent Orange to have detrimental effects to this day. After seeing its destructive power, the US decided to ban Agent Orange in 1971. They took it to the Johnston Atoll and destroyed the last one in 1978. At our number 7 spot, we have My Lai Massacre. This could possibly be one of America's worst war crimes they have ever committed, so it's pretty dark, just for the warning. On March 16, 1968, a platoon of US soldiers brutally massacred a total up to 347 unarmed civilians at My Lai. They were told inside that Viet Cong were in the area, but when they arrived there, they weren't there. Despite no sign of hostility, Lieutenant William Calley gave the orders for them to open fire on the villagers. The victims included men, women, children, and even infants. After they violated and mutilated the villagers, they went on to burn the village along with slaughtering all of their livestock. It was a complete war crime. It wasn't until an army pilot named Hugh Thompson was walking when he noticed bodies and bodies of civilians as he approached the gunfire. But as he approached the gunfire, he noticed that it was his own comrade shooting. In a change of events, Hugh gave them the orders to stop or he would open fire on them. A total of 26 soldiers were charged with criminal offenses, but only William Calley would be convicted and found guilty of taking the lives of 22 villagers. He was given a life sentence. This event will remain a huge stain on the US military for a long time. At a number 6 spot, we have the Ace of Spades. Another example of psychological warfare done by the US was the Ace of Spades. And yes, I'm talking about the playing card. So for background info, the US Airborne Division used to put an Ace of Spades on their helmet for good luck. Fast forward to the Vietnam War, and the US soldiers made it a tradition to leave an Ace of Spades on the helmets of deceased Vietnamese soldiers. Soon the card would be associated with death to both the Vietnamese and the Americans. Eventually, as more Viet Cong saw this happening, their morale would go down, and the Americans knew this. So Charlie Company asked the US playing card company to supply them with crates filled with the Ace of Spades cards, which were labeled as Bicycle Secret Weapon upon arrival. And they used all these cards and they dropped them all over Vietnamese villages and jungles to frighten them. The Americans would continue to use this to taunt them by keeping it on their helmet as an anti-peace sign. This card would be later known as the Death Card. Right in the hump of our list, we have napalm. The Vietnam War had its fair share of destructive weapons, but nothing comes close to napalm, which would have been the worst weapon used in a war since the atomic bomb. Napalm, in simple terms, is basically liquid fire or a firebomb fuel gel mixture. It would often have a gelling powder composed of naphthalene and palmitate mixed with gasoline to form a sticky combustible substance. substance. Its sticky nature is the reason why it was so devastating when it released. The substance would stick onto its victims all while burning them alive, or at least causing 4th or 5th degree burns. The area napalm can cover up to 2,500 square yards, which would be completely engulfed in fire. The reason for these bombs in the first place was to support ground troops and to demoralize the enemy. Burning alive has got to be one of the worst ways to go, and seeing this fire would literally be seeing hell on earth. It eventually got banned in 1980 by the United Nations and listed as a war crime. Glad to know this one is gone, but the fact we got to see its powers is terrifying for the future. At number 4 spot, we have the AK-47 over the M16. During the war, American troops would abandon their American-owned M16 assault rifles to use the Viet Cong's AK-47 instead. This was a reason because the M16 was just not as reliable as the AK-47. First, the US changed their ammunition sizes without notifying, and it caused a lot of these guns to jam at pretty random times, which you could imagine would be pretty inconvenient in a gunfight. Second, the M16 couldn't be handled in jungle terrain. It would regularly jam when mud seeped into the gun. I mean, let's compare the two. The AK-47 is a 7.62mm gas-operated assault rifle with the capability to shoot up to 600 rounds per minute. It's claimed to be the most powerful due to the fact it doesn't break or even jam or even overheat. I mean, I don't even need to mention the M16, it has nothing compared to the AK-47. At number 3 spot, we have the Coochie tunnels. Deep inside the jungles were not only booby traps, but a system of underground tunnels for the Viet Cong to hide and move around unnoticed. These were known as the Coochie tunnels. These were a network of underground tunnels stretching more than 124 miles long. Although these tunnels were known internationally from the Vietnam War, Vietnamese did this well before, back in the 1940s during the War for Independence from the French. However, it wasn't until the Vietnam War where the tunnels would be dug for miles, with reports saying that the tunnels travel from the outskirts of Saigon all the way to the Cambodian border. These tunnels were by far anywhere near safe. Not only did you have to worry about the tunnels collapsing due to the poor construction of it, there would be snakes and scorpions and other booby traps inside of these tunnels. It's said that 45,000 Vietnamese men and women passed away defending these tunnels during the war. At number 2 spot, we have the massacre at Hue. Hue was one of the longest and bloodiest bouts during the Vietnam War, lasting a total of 26 days. During that time, up to 6,000 civilians and prisoners of war were abused, tortured, and executed at random. The Viet Cong believed this to be a cleansing of the area to anyone who opposed the rule and those who were invading their country. This battle was part of the Tet Offensive, which is when North Vietnam launched a grand-scale assault on every city in South Vietnam. The Viet Congs had a total of 80,000 troops ready before this assault, and despite the Americans knowing about this prior, they were still caught off guard. At a number 1 spot, we have Welcome with Flowers. The earliest Americans participating in the Vietnam War worked for the Office of Strategic Services, which served as the CIA's forerunner. As early as 1954, they were assisting the French and Southern governments of Saigon. Marines made their first official ground landing in Da Nang in 1965, beginning the first formal ground operation. Instead of a D-Day invasion, local women and flowers were welcomed to the troops. This would forever be eerie because of what happened following this event. The Vietnam War was brutal for both sides, and this side of friendliness is so uncharacteristic of the time. Who knows, the Vietnamese girls who put the flowers on the US soldiers could have been the future victims of their firearms, making this one the top of our list. Number 10, the cursed Kleenex commercial. In 1986, Kleenex released a commercial in Japan that has sparked a series of disturbing urban legends. The ad featured a woman in white and an ogre-looking child sitting on a pile of hay and enjoying Kleenex tissues while the song It's a Fine Day by Jane and Barton played in the background. While almost instantly after the commercial was aired, TV stations and Kleenex corporate allegedly began receiving complaints about the ad, which many found very unsettling. Some people claim that the entire film crew met untimely deaths in freak accidents following this, while others said that the child in the commercial had passed away immediately after filming. There are also rumors that the actress Kaiku Matsuzaka had either passed away or been committed to a psychiatric hospital or even became pregnant with a demon baby following the commercial. Others claim that when the ad came on at night, the singer's voice in the commercial transformed from that of a young soprano to a raspy old woman's, and the ad became so unsettling to the public that Kleenex eventually pulled it and replaced it with a different one. However, after doing further research, Kaiku Matsuzaka, the girl in the video, is alive and well, and besides that, it's not that bad of an ad. Or at least I think that. At a number 9 spot, we have the Sony timer. The Sony timer, also known as a Sony kill switch, is a rumored feature that is said to exist in electronic devices produced by Sony. The feature was that Sony devices were equipped with a timer that causes the product to stop functioning after a predetermined period of time, forcing you to purchase a replacement. Considering the stuff we know about the Apple updates slowing your phone down, this is really not a surprise now. Anyways, the legend of the Sony timer originated in Japan in the 1980s and early 1990s, and despite the lack of concrete evidence to support the myth, a significant portion of the Japanese population believed in it. The legend remained confined in Japan until 2006, when a recall of over 4 million Dell laptops equipped with defective Sony lithium batteries rekindled the legend of the Sony timer. And despite Sony's efforts to contain the rumor, it eventually came to the knowledge of consumers outside of Japan and had a negative impact on the sales of Sony Vaio laptop computers. Then more recently in 2021, the legend resurfaced once again when an anti-cheat measure in the PlayStation Network had the potential to render games unplayable on certain PlayStation consoles. But much of this is still speculation, and such a thing is not confirmed whether or not it truly existed, but we really know that they try to make our devices bad, so they want us to buy a replacement. We all know that. At number 8 spot, we have the Alice killings. The Alice killings remain one of the most mysterious and unsolved serial killings in Japanese history. From 1999 to 2005, 5 killings took place, each with a calling card left at the scene by the killer. More specifically, a playing card with the word Alice would be written on it on the victim's blood. The victims were diverse, ranging from a restaurant owner to a high school student to a college student to a nurse. However, they all shared the eerie and gruesome playing card left at the scene of their murders. The first victim, Sasaki Megumi, was a 29-year-old restaurant owner known for her strong personality and excellent cooking. She was last seen alive walking home from a party, and the next morning her body was found in the woods, torn apart and impaled on tree branches, with the Jack of Spades card found in her mouth. The second victim, Yamane Akio, was a singer whose body was found in a bar, his vocal cords ripped out and a gunshot wound to the head. The King of Diamonds card was found in his hands. The third victim, Kai Sakura, was a high school student whose body was found in a shallow grave, mutilated and with a crown sewn onto her head. The Queen of Clubs card was found on a stick marking the grave. The fourth victim, Hasegawa Hiroki, was a college student whose body was found with the Ace of Spades card. The fifth and final victim, Takahashi Ayumi, was a nurse whose body was found with the Joker card. After doing further research, fortunately this person never existed in Japan, but in reality there was a serial killer who was caught that was using playing cards, except it was in Spain, not Japan. They were caught in 2003 and sentenced to 142 years in prison, and not to worry, they do not have a pack of playing cards with them, nor will I think they will ever be allowed to play with cards ever again. Number 7, the Howling Inuwaki Tunnel. The legend of the Inuwaki Tunnel and the village has been a source of fascination in Japan for decades. Located in the remote mountains of the Fukuoka prefecture, the tunnel is said to be haunted by the ghosts of those who went missing inside of it, and is only accessible through an abandoned village called the Inuwaki village. According to the legend, all who enter the village are doomed to a violent death, and the Japanese constitution does not apply there. The legend of the Inuwaki Tunnel and village may have been inspired by a real-life murder that took place in the tunnel in 1988. According to the story, a group of teens kidnapped, robbed, and tortured a young man before burning him alive in the tunnel. The tunnel, being remote and rarely used by traffic, was a popular spot for gangs, and the brutal murder likely contributed to the creation of the legend in the first place. Today, the tunnel is considered one of the most haunted places in Japan, with large concrete bricks blocking its entrance, but that hasn't stopped adventurers from trying to enter it. Locals say that electronic devices and even their cars often break down when they're around this tunnel, and that others sometimes hear the sounds of barking dogs and ghostly screams emanating from deep inside of the tunnel. The legend has inspired numerous films and books and other sorts of media, including the 2020 film Howling Village from Ju-on creator Takashi Shimizu. Number 6, the Yaomaoba. Ever wanted to take a hike in the mountains of Japan? Well, just be on the lookout for the Yaomaoba, also known as the Mountain Witch, who supposedly resides in these elevated regions of the country. Yaomaoba is often depicted as an old woman with long unkempt hair and a wild experience who lives in the mountains and is associated with the spirit world. According to the stories, this creature is a benevolent figure who helps lost travelers find their way home, while in other stories, she is portrayed as a malevolent being who lures people into the mountains and causes them to go missing. Some locals claim that she was once a regular girl who ran into the mountains to escape false accusations. Here she grew angry and resentful and would eventually have cannibalistic tendencies along with practicing black magic. So on your next hike, don't be deceived by anyone you might come across, because the amount of encounters with this creature leads me to believe that she is really up there in the mountains of Japan. Number 5, Kagoya Kagomi Kagomi. Kagomi Kagomi is a Japanese children's game, and in the game, a group of children joins hands and walks around in circles around a child who is chosen to be the Oni, or demon. The Oni sits in the center of the circle with their eyes covered, while the other children sing the Kagomi Kagomi song. When the song is over, the Oni has to guess the name of the person standing directly behind them. This game takes a sinister twist when a group of people found themselves caught in the game on a foggy suspension bridge. In this case, the group was split into 2 cars, with the first car carrying 3 people and the second car carrying 4 people. So when they reach the bridge, it is already getting dark and the fog is not helping. The first car comes to a halt and the couple gets out, joining hands. They then climb over the railing of the bridge and throw themselves off, much to the shock and horror of the other passengers. One of the other people in the car is found talking to themselves, repeatedly muttering the quote, "mustn't go." The couple is later found dead and is ruled to have both taken their lives. When they ask the remaining survivors of the first car what happened, they say that a girl wearing kimono suddenly appeared in front of their car, causing them to stop. This is when they said that their car was encircled by a group of children who then began saying Kagomi Kagomi. The children were enticing the passengers to join hands with them, and the couple eventually gave in, while the manager was protected by religiously repeating the phrase